Hello everyone, week 2 is in the history books and we're on to week 3. This week we're going to learn about some really interesting things. We're going to talk about advertising, we're going to talk a little bit about identity theft, and I want you to really think about these things as you go throughout your week and watch for examples and opportunities to identify what types of advertising you're seeing and think about how it can affect you a little bit. First we're going to just dive in and look at a few different things on the assignments. And I feel like it's pretty straightforward this week as far as what you're trying to do. And so I want to kind of go through that with you and hopefully that we get on the same page that way. So again, I'm here viewing as a student. If I click on the content tab, and if we jump over here to week 3, and you click on it, it'll pull everything up. And you do have it here, but you also have it in this middle section. And the important thing about this is it shows you the due dates. And so I really want to stress this week is fairly easy. Um, all of the assignments are due on the 7th, so they're all due at the very end here, with the exception of the initial post in your advertising and fraud discussion. That is due on the 3rd. That's tomorrow. So again, just like with last week, you need to have your initial post in by Tuesday and then finish the discussion up later in the week. So everything else is due on the 7th. So let's just take a quick look at each one of them in turn. The first here is this activity instructions. You do need to read through the activity instructions, in part because this is going to give you the information that are required for your main activity later on. So take the time to read through this. This week is actually pretty light on the reading, honestly, and so I really expect you to get in and read through each of the items and understand kind of what the Federal Trade Commission does, the different types of advertising, how advertising can be deceptive, and some of the things that you can do to understand how it's affecting you and what to do if you do feel like you've been the victim of fraud or unfair practices. Alright, so let's take a look real quick then. So that's just the instructions there. Sometimes in the instructions they'll have additional readings at the bottom. Again, I said this week is pretty light that way, so there aren't additional instructions or anything that way. We have a quiz based on the reading, so please take that, and I would encourage you to do it sooner rather than later. Again, if you wait till the end and something comes up, it can be frustrating. The next one is our big activity. That's activity 3. And when you take a look at activity 3, I want you to really consider the points. So at 50 points, this is the single largest activity and the influence on your grade that you've had thus far. And I think a good way to measure how much effort you should put into something, frankly, is relative to the value on your grade. There were some that on the discussion post didn't put very much effort at all, which was surprising considering it was 30 points, which was at that point the largest point value activity they'd had so far. So 50 points should indicate that there's a fair amount of effort involved. So there's a few different things. The first is you're going to create a one-page poster. You're going to find ads from the newspaper, the magazine, the internet that include examples of advertising, and you're going to label them. So we cut a picture out of them, put it up on there, and say, hey, this is an example of informative advertising, or this is an example of something we'd have to be careful with. The buy one get one free, and whatever it does that way. And the reading from the first portion is what's going to help you identify those different types of advertising. Then you're going to ask some questions, or answer some questions, excuse me, in a short essay. So again, an essay doesn't mean you're going to answer bullet points. It means you're presenting the thoughts and making a cohesive argument and bringing them together. So it doesn't have to be long, but in general we should see a couple of small paragraphs for each. And again, a paragraph is at least 3 sentences. So you're going to say, would you place restrictions on businesses, and if so, what would the restrictions be, and how would you enforce them? Then I want you to go ahead and look through the websites that are provided. So you've got the Securities and Exchange Commission, Justice Department, and the FBI, and identify and describe practices you're willing to adopt to protect yourself from fraud in a short essay. So, what is it you're going to do to protect yourself from fraud in the different forms it can be, whether it's protecting yourself as you interact on the internet and emails, the way you take care of your computer, what you do with physical documents. Any of those things can be utilized. And finally, you're going to create the poster in step 1 electronically and submit it to me using a file with the activity submission link. So as it says right here, include your answer in the questions and your 3 identified fraud practices to avoid. So that's this right here, the 3 practices that you're going to do to try and avoid fraud. So that whole assignment the poster, looking through the websites, talking about how you're going to identify fraud, and then uploading everything to to me so I can see that and see what it is that you're doing to be active that way. Okay, so that's the big one, the advertising of fraud. Now with that, there's the discussion. Now I want you to think about this for a second. The discussion indicates that by tomorrow you should have made your initial post talking about, different ways that you can use advertisements to make good decisions, why it's difficult to decide whether an advertisement is deceptive, beauty and grooming products seldom use informative advertising, um, why do consumers who know better fail to do so, and how do you avoid being victimized by fraudulent practices. If you are going to make this post by tomorrow, that implies that you have done the reading by tomorrow and also visited the FTC website, the FBI website, and looked at what some of these practices are by tomorrow. Does that make sense? So if you don't make that initial post, this information is usually pretty clear whether or not you've actually done the reading and you understand the questions they're asking and what we're looking for. The second step, so that first step is due tomorrow. Get in, get the reading done, and answer the questions. The second step is looking at the posts of other students. And so again, you've got time to do that. You want to respond to at least 3 other posts. If you have a situation like this last week where some groups were very small, then I want to see you engaged with the other students and answering back and forth. If I can see that you put forward a genuine effort and had meaningful discussions and meaningful questions that were presented to the other students, I'm not going to penalize you for there being fewer than 3 in the group, but I am going to expect to see a higher level of activity between the ones that are there. If they're just not responding at all, that's really not your fault. Do the best that you can and shoot me an email if you're concerned, and I will certainly look at that as I make grading on the assignments. The grading rubric is pretty clear. So the answer to each question, the responses, and the mechanics. And quite honestly, I grade very similarly when I go through things. If there's an essay or something, try to break it up to have a weighted score for each item that it asks for and whether or not it's provided. And then some of them are the mechanics, the grammar, if it was an essay, what it was supposed to be, and so on and so forth. So this should be a good rule of thumb for you when moving forward. Finally, this last one, instead of a free write this week, you have something a little different. You have a teach someone else experience. So I want you to take some of the things you learned about advertising or identity theft or fraud and talk to someone else about it. Make the effort to get in there and teach someone about what you learned. You should identify a couple things very clearly: what the principle is, what the skills taught and method of instruction, and who it is that you talk to, and what you learned by trying to talk to them. This can benefit you in a lot of ways. When you teach someone else, you're more likely to remember it yourself. And it also gives them an opportunity to ask questions and clarify, and that can really help you gauge where you're at in your understanding when you have to answer additional questions. And finally, you're going to submit that assignment to me. I really look forward to working with each one of you this week. I encourage you to please send me a text or an email if you have questions. If you're trying to get a hold of me at the last minute, like on a Saturday or something, where most of those assignments are all due at 11 o'clock on Saturday, please don't send me an email at 9:30 on Saturday and expect that I'm going to be just waiting to answer that. Try to reach out to me as early as possible, and if there are questions or concerns, you may consider sending me a text message instead, where my contact information is there. I look forward to spending time with each one of you, and I really am interested to see things that you're learning and identifying as we talk about this week during the discussion boards. Some of you may wonder, I don't answer every single post from every single student. Obviously, we have a lot of students in the class, and between grading assignments and everything, I'm not in a position where I can answer, personally respond to every single post. But I do make efforts to try and reach out to each student, whether it's through email, whether it's through discussion posts, and I hope that during the course of the semester you'll see that we have opportunities to connect on a personal level. And if you have questions about something, that way feel free to throw them up to me as well. Just because it's not something that's specifically outlined in the class, I would much rather talk about some of the things that you have an interest in and that there's an immediate personal need than necessarily just deal with the class issues. And that's something we can definitely do in the discussions topic or email or otherwise other places. So again, I love you, praying for you. I want you to remember that the scriptures tell us that we can seek after all good gifts, and one of those good gifts is the gift of discernment. And discernment is knowing things the way that the Lord knows them. When it comes to advertising and fraud, these are one of those areas where really we genuinely need the gift of discernment to understand what it is that someone is trying to do and to see clearly the way that we're acting on something and make the changes that we need accordingly. Um, I want you to know that the Savior Jesus Christ changes our lives, and that when we take the time to seek Him out, He provides us that vision we talked about last week to see clearly. When our values are in place, when our goals are in place, then as these types of things, pressure from advertising or someone coming to you with a fraudulent activity trying to encourage you to do something or deceive you in one way or the other, you are protected by grounding your values and your goals in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost can act on that and respond accordingly. Let's have a great week. I look forward to seeing and hearing more from each one of you.